I was very blessed to always have very good role models along the way that really gave me sound advice. And like I said, I'll always be grateful for the work they did, because my dad always really pushed me academically and everything else. And then as each level, I seemed to always, just very fortunately found people who could teach me those things that the academic role can't.
Welcome to Beyond the Blueprint, powered by Contractors, Closers, and Connections, Orlando. Join me for in-depth interviews with some of the top commercial real estate and development executives in the industry. We uncover their success stories, their strategies, and their lessons learned along the way. Gain valuable insight whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out. Welcome to Beyond the Blueprint podcast, part 1, sitting down with Tony Benge and learning how he started his first development at the age of 22 with nearly 75 other developments under his belt. Stay tuned to learn about his origin story, where he came from, and where he got today. Tony, I appreciate you joining us here.
Glad to be here.
Beyond the Blueprint podcast. We're off to a really good start, and you're one of the first guests to come on. So I'm very thankful that you agreed to come out and kind of just share your story and some of the things learned along the way. I know there's a lot of people just itching to know some things, so we're gonna try to pull some stuff out of you.
I'm an open book. Fire away.
Yeah. So Tony, a lot of our listeners want to hear just origin stories, so that's where we like to start. Who you are, what you're doing now, and then kind of let's take us all the way back to how you started in the commercial real estate and development industry, what's some of the things that piqued your interest. And so I'll let you kind of take it away.
Sure. I was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, and my next door neighbor was Owen Brown, who is the principal behind Retail Planning Corporation. And so every summer I would kind of, beg him to take me under his wing a little bit and teach me a little bit about real estate, because it's something I was always curious with. Ended up coming down to go to Rollins for my undergraduate degree. I got through that in 3 years. And then while I was doing the executive MBA program at UCF, I did something pretty crazy. Bought our first development. And so we started small with a 1,200-acre development known as Eastwood in East Orlando. I had just graduated. I was 22 years old.
Wow.
And bought it with a local attorney, a guy by the name of Tom Warlick, who, brilliant attorney and had some development experience, and I had no idea. I was an economics
what is development?
Hell is development?
I could run the spreadsheet, but
right. You knew it on the surface, didn't know any of the technical aspects of it, and got into it where it was a deal that my ex-father-in-law had been developing and had entered into a contract with Richard Swan in town. Some litigation broke out, so the court determined to make it a sealed bid sale.
Wow.
And so we put together a bid and won it, I think like $18 million or something like that back in 1994. And thought we had it sold to Syntex on the back because it would just be a quick flip,
right,
and didn't have to know how to develop. Well, that fell apart right after we bought the property, and we had two choices: go bankrupt or learn to develop. So we quickly learned to develop. And 7 years later, we'd sold 2,600 homes, and at one point, it was the fastest selling development in Florida till the Villages knocked us out of number one. So
wow.
It was a good start to the development career.
Yeah. And so you're in college, you're in your MBA program, is that what it is? And so what's going through your mind when you're like, hey, we're going to buy this piece of land? What?
Knew we had an opportunity to buy it at a good number, and again had a contract at the time with Syntex, thinking, oh, this is a great arbitrage. Buy it for relatively low number, sell it for a higher one, be a good day.
Simple math. This is a good deal. Let's do it.
And you quickly learn how most things in real estate never go quite as planned. And so instead of it being a 3-month in and out, it was a 7-year in and out. And
sure,
we learned how to develop.
Yeah.
And I was very blessed. I had a contractor and neighbor named Jeff Fuquay of Amick Construction. And Jeff took pity on me and kind of became my mentor and taught me really everything I know about development. Jeff is a fascinating character in town. So if anyone's been to the airport, Jeff Fuquay Boulevard, he was chairman of the Aviation Authority for a number of years.
Big name.
But he's got dual PhDs in psychology and mathematics. So not what you would typically find in a site contract.
Yeah, right.
And so he was very analytical and about everything, and just really took the time and patience to spend with me. And he developed the bulk of Eastwood for us. And it was a great relationship. We ended up doing some other deals together, and he's still a dear friend and somebody I will always be indebted to for him taking the time and kind of charity on a 22-year-old or
Sure.
trying to figure out what the hell to do to make a development work.
So, one of the things that I've noticed, and this is especially in my life, just the value of those mentors, right? So it seems like even early on you had a mentor, that you were getting in, you're doing your MBA.
I did. I was very fortunate. My father was the first person in our family ever to go to college. He was a drill sergeant in the Marine Corps for a while, and my build at about 6'2", so my childhood was, needless to say, I wasn't going to do anything that stupid because I had the fear of
you wouldn't get away with much.
You would take a beating if you did something bad, and but he always pushed me. He said, be your own boss, work for yourself, and he was one that really pushed me to interact with Owen, our next door neighbor. And I mean, he always just kept pushing me, and he always tells the story too about how to give your father a heart attack. When I was doing the Eastwood deal, I needed him to invest in it. So I called him up one day and said, "Hey, Dad, you don't mind lending me $500,000 on this crazy real estate deal I want to do?"
There's a personal guarantee.
well, that was the $17 million loan with SunTrust deal on top of that. And he goes, "Why in the hell would somebody want my signature on that?" And he goes, "What?" I'm like, "Trust me, they'll do it." He goes, "Sure as hell we did." But I was very blessed to always have very good role models along the way that really gave me sound advice. And, like I said, I'll always be grateful for the work they did because, I mean, my dad always really pushed me academically and everything else. And then as each level, I seemed to always, just very fortunately found people who could teach me those things that the academic role can't.
Sure.
The applied knowledge of the guys with the experience who have done it for so long is just invaluable. Mm-hmm. And so I always took the approach, I know what I don't know. And when you have people, the likes of like Jeff and everything, that could come in and teach you that, I mean, you're learning from the masters.
Right.
And so to just be quiet, listen, and learn.
Right.
And it was wild for many, many years because most of them had kids older than me. Right. And so all my partners were my parents' age or older, and here I'm this 22, 23-year-old kid running around doing this stuff. And
right.
Just, I guess, thank God you're foolish back then, because if not, you'd have worried yourself to death about what you're doing.
Sometimes ignorance is bliss.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, looking back on them, like, was I high or crazy? Well,
right.
Why would I do this?
Right.
But it seemed to work out okay.
So let's go back to the mentorship. So was that something that you have sought out? Because it seemed like your dad played a big part in making sure that happened too.
He did. I mean, it was kind of a wild thing that my mom was a school teacher, so she always really pushed the education as well as my father. And they would always make sure that we got involved with things, but they would always carry it to the next level. So it wasn't just, if you're passionate about something, go, whether it be a sport or another interest, do it. I mean, they would find who the best was. And for instance, when I was 12, my dad wanted me to start getting into weightlifting and competing, and he finds Coffey's gym. So I had the Olympic coach started teaching me powerlifting at 12. And so he would always go that extra mile to make sure that whoever was being brought in to train us were always the top people in the area. And I think that just kind of set a pattern for us where we would intentionally seek out whoever was doing it the best. And just
it's going to push you.
And absolutely. Yeah. And, just the more you realize your limitations are mainly self-imposed. I mean, if you're willing to do the work, there's not much you can't accomplish.
Right.
And these guys were kind of living proof of that. And it made it very easy to see, okay, it can be done.
Yeah.
And because I've watched people do it. And along the way, everyone was always encouraging. There was never somebody saying, you can't do that, it's too much, don't. It was always, if you're willing to put in the work, you can achieve it. Right. And I think that gave us the confidence to do what we look back on now and just shake our head and think, what the hell are we thinking? Yeah. But it was really that confidence that was built up through those relationships that allowed us to do it.
And it seems like some of those mentors, they push your limits, but they also act as like a safety net. So they know exactly where you're crossing that boundary, right? But they know how to push you to where he's like, you're not getting really everything out of yourself.
They like testing with adversity too, to see how you react. And they were always the bumpers. I mean, they were only going to let you go so far before they would kind of knock you back into play. Right. But it also the best way to learn is to do. And sometimes they need you to hit those walls. And that's the way you learn the best lessons.
Right. And so Jeff, and then the mentor you had before that, did you go maybe find him, or did he just kind of fall in your lap and be like, hey, that's a guy that I need to learn from?
Really, we had him bid one of the jobs, and when we were meeting with the contractors afterwards, you just got an immediate feel like, okay, this guy was very open book, very just genuine with, we'd ask questions, they would take the time to answer them thoroughly. It wouldn't be just, just trying to gloss over everything. He took the time to really walk through, and I appreciate that. And one of the moments that really solidified it, we had built one community as 90-foot lots, and Cambridge Homes at the time had requested that, and they came back and said, we'd like them retrofitted as 70s. And Jeff is like, everything's done. I mean, we got to rip it all out and redo it. And he goes, if I have to bid it, I have to assume worst case everything. He goes, look, if this is my job, let's do it. Time and materials. I'll keep you informed on everything. It ended up being half the price of what it would have been had he bid it.
Right.
And I remember my partner, Tom at the time got, he was furious that we had done it that way. And I said, well, we can always revert back to the fixed bid that was twice as much if it was so bad. And it was the difference in mentality. Tom had never sat down with him and really gone through it and understood why we did it that way versus when we finally, kind of went open book with it and walked him through the differences. But, okay, well, now I understand, and it was good. But it was that extra time and attention that Jeff was willing to do is what drew me to him. Mm-hmm. And then the knowledge we gained by just, having him as a resource was incredible.
Sure. And did you continue that relationship as you progressed in your career?
Absolutely. And, a lot of those guys are retired now, and they've either, closed the businesses down and go on, a lot of the successors that were the kind of the entry-level guys when I came in are now the ones running the companies.
Yeah.
And so it's been fun to watch. John Miklos was working for Modica and Associates as a entry-level tech guy when we started Eastwood, and now, he's been with Biotech, our main contractor for environmental work for, since, the inception of Biotech.
Yeah, right.
And so it was funny again to see how we all started out at different levels, but now it's like the guys who've been in the industry so long, it's a pretty close-knit fraternity.
Sure. So your first development starts at 22, right? Mm-hmm. And when does it finish? When you say, okay, we're done with this development?
It took us 7 years to finish that one.
So you're 29,
mm-hmm.
You're done. So it took you 7 years, 22 to 29. You've got your first development under your belt. And so what was the price tag on that development?
I think we paid at the time, it was like $18 million for the land, and then we developed it out, did the public shopping center, did about 2,600 lots and homes. So the total build out was massive. And of all ironies, now we're in a lawsuit with Orange County over after 30 years the golf course closed.
Yeah.
And we had 309 units left in the PD by right, unanimous approval at DRC, and then we got denied at the commission with a 3-2 vote. So we had to file a Burt Harris claim. And
sure.
So that's going to be funny 30 years later to be back where you started.
Where you started. Yeah. Was taking a step back to go forward. Kind of deal. Today's episode is brought to you by Bryce Knuth of Insurance Office of America. As a contractor or real estate owner in Florida, you've likely experienced the impact of rising insurance premiums year after year. With the challenging insurance marketplace, having a specialist who focuses on your industry is critical now more than ever before. If you'd like a second set of eyes on your current insurance program or don't have a relationship with your current broker, please contact Bryce Knuth at 407-697-6944 via call or text, or email bryce.knuth@ioausa.com. Don't let rising insurance costs catch you off guard. Reach out to Bryce today. So you're 29, you sell that deal, you go on to your next community. And then what kind of brings you to where you are today and with Benge Development?
Oh, God, we spent just nonstop development ever since then.
So is this just you and you just having partners? Are you building a company or?
We had Benge Development since 94, and we've had a multitude of partners. Some that started with us are still with us. Others are new that come in. It's really just finding what people's sweet spots were and just kind of filling those in, where we started off purely residential and now we're really probably more mixed use than anything. Mm-hmm. So we changed a little bit in the 07, 08 downturn was one big thing that pushed that, because suddenly when single family just stopped, when the capital markets crashed, the IL, AL was a great substitute for some of the areas. Multifamily kicked in and some of the retail. And so we quickly diversified and got into that and found that we really liked that multifamily space, because it was probably the least prone to just seismic changes like we had in 07, 08.
Sure.
You have multiple asset classes to spread the risk over.
Yeah.
And so that's what we've tried to focus on more. The build to rent definitely came in as a much more viable model in our mind because you can get out of the land in one transaction versus the long-term takedowns. And the longer and the older we've gotten, kind of our risk tolerance is receding as well because, you know, when you're 20, you don't mind doing something a little crazy. When you get in 50, you're a little more.
Right.
You're
Maybe
20, I don't need to quite
just
do
go
that.
back to the apartment, sharing a room with
Exactly. So it's been a wild ride, but it's one that, you know, you always lament if I knew then what I know now, how things could have been different.
Sure.
And so, but I guess that's always going to be the case.
Yeah. So now, I mean, because in your side of things, you know, you rely heavily on different partners, right? So, you know, even from find the deal to all the way finishing the deal, there's a ton of different actual partners. They're not actually people that necessarily work for you, but they're actually partners in the deal. What is something that, if you had to pick a generality that you like really hone in on when you're looking for a partner?
A lot of times it's just, we've been very fortunate that any partner we've been able to work with prior to bringing him in as a partner. So we get to see kind of how we would interact together. And as the deals have gotten larger in scale and scope, we have gotten more opportunities to partner with different individuals, but we still pretty much use a core group that I'd say we've been with for the last 10 years. That their bandwidth and capacity to do larger deals has expanded as well. And so we really are trying to keep it within that limit now and just recycle within a certain area of exposure. Just with, like I said, everyone's risk tolerance is just a little more fine-tuned now, that we're not quite as aggressive as we once were.
What's something that you look at now when you're evaluating your risk versus how you look? I mean, obviously the tolerance is a lot lower, but what is some ways that you evaluate, like, hey, can I get out of this deal quick if I have to? Is that something?
Yeah, and we always look at it too. I mean, if you're going to get main on main with the right, you know, Kelly Park is a great example. I mean, it's going to be tough to screw that one up just with the nature of the demand.
Right.
But if you do it right, you know, it can make a huge difference of the absorption rates, the timing, the quality of the tenants, everything else. So that's really now more of our focus of being patient for that right deal versus just having a multitude of them. And we very carefully selected the area we wanted to be at within Kelly Park, and we were able to secure the tenant we wanted. And we're looking forward and later this year to be able to announce kind of who the key anchors are. But we're very pleased with what we were able to bring in, and think that sets the stage for just tremendous growth. That in its way is kind of our mitigation, risk mitigation thing, is to have the anchor everybody wants at the right location. You should be the dominant center at that point.
Right. And all of your partners are their risk tolerances, like, is there a conceptual agreement that says, hey, like, we're not going to push the limits this much?
It varies. I mean, we've got some of the guys that have had incredible business events happen for them that their tolerance may go the other way. We're now, you know, a couple $1 million is a rounding error, whereas it may have been very near and dear a few years ago. But they like the fact that they know we're very sensitive to the risk. If we think anything goes beyond a standard risk profile, I mean, we're very open with them, and we get their consensus whether or not they want to take the risk. But we're finding for the most part they pretty much like the plan of going in where you've got some of it preset, that they feel the confidence of that as long as I'm in the proximity of, you know, these key anchors or whatever, that, you know, their risk
Still
there
safe.
may be a time frame that if we hope to be in and out in 3 years, maybe it takes 4. If that's the worst risk, it's a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
Very rarely are we looking at anything now that we truly worry about. Are we going to be able to get the capital back out of it?
Right.
Most everything we had now, we were able to get the land basis very right. That a lot of these we were into many years before now, and it's just been a lot of quiet work in the background getting them ready.
Right.
And so it really, that's kind of where we like having the larger pipeline too, because in an aggregate you can minimize the risk, where one may be slightly higher, but then you've got kind of an offsetting one that they're in as well that provides that safety.
So, you know, starting your first development to now, how many developments do you have under your belt? Let's include in Kelly Park.
Probably say 75, 80.
75. Yeah.
Somewhere in
And
that
do you
ballpark.
feel like through each one of those you learn something different or new?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's always, you just wait for it. There's always going to be a curveball from hell that you just wait for. I mean, we had one recently that we had a multifamily group, had a great number on one of our sites to come in. Yeah, I was ready to close on it. And he walked up and realized that there was a former church on the property. He said, I made a covenant with God 5 years ago. I would never tear down another church.
No
I
way.
can't do this deal. And he said, I'll even leave my deposit behind. I can't violate that promise.
Hey, well, good for him. I
And
mean,
that's what he said. He said, look, we appreciate the honesty.
Yeah.
And he goes, however, he goes, I've got a partner who will do it in a heartbeat at the same number. And we're like, introduce us and we're good.
Yeah.
You know? But it was just, I mean, how would you have ever thought of that?
Right.
You know, I mean, that's the kind of craziness that you may find.
if you had to pick one thing that out of all of the 75 developments that was like the thing that still sticks in your mind today, what would you say it was?
Oh,
I'm sure they all do at some point.
probably the city of Oak Hill passing a law banning sanitary sewer when we were in the middle of developing 2 miles of frontage of the Intercoastal Waterway, and having the local sheriff walk out and tell me I was going to be arrested if I didn't stop putting sanitary pipe in the ground.
In the middle of the development.
In the middle of the development, because the 74-year-old female mayor, who was a prison guard, who bragged that she had a 5th grade education and that it was going to force her to tie into a sanitary, and she owned an old trailer park on the river. And so it was a battle royal, and we ended up having to bring a local attorney here, Ted Estes, out to deal with it, and the League of Cities had to get involved and threatened to decharter the city over it. But I mean, that was one that
You're like, wow.
I woke
how
up
did
this
that
morning
even-
not expecting to be told I'd be put in jail if I put sanitary sewer in the ground.
Right. That's interesting. You know, I think one of the values, just in your origin story, right, and just kind of like understanding where you came from, and even now, I mean, even 75 developments past, it seems like some of the mentors and even the relationships with the partners are something that really set you up to make sure that you became who you are today.
It did. I mean, I was very blessed with, I mean, it is so easy to not take the time to teach people coming up or just be too busy to deal with it. And I'll always be so grateful for these guys taking the true time not only to show me what to do, but to truly teach me and bring me in and educate me and show me better ways of doing things. And they're things I'm still utilizing today.
Yeah.
And I kind of look at it as it's going to be our obligation to pass that on as well. And so we've got a couple guys in our office now that are young, that are very hungry, wanting to learn. And it's funny how you see yourself repeating the cycle now, where you're imparting the same knowledge they were kind enough to impart on us to the next group. And I just think that's going to be a great way to keep the cycle going.
Sure.
And just,
It brings a lot of fulfillment too.
absolutely.
To know that
'Cause
you got that, you received it, and now you can give.
definitely feel obligated to give it back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. That's a very inspiring origin story. I mean, 22 years old. Holy crap. At 22 years old, I couldn't imagine what I'd be thinking about.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I was thinking either.
Yeah, no. So we're going to jump into part 2, where we kind of dive into where you are today. But I appreciate you sharing that story. Beyond the Blueprint, make sure you stay tuned for part 2. We're going to sit down with Tony, get into some of the cool and unique things that he has today and has going on. So stay tuned, and we'll see you next time.